Susan Arlene Winters graced the world with her presence on March 14, 1966, born to loving parents and an older brother, Christopher. From her earliest days, Susan exhibited an unwavering determination, excelling in both her academic pursuits and athletic endeavors. In 1984, she captained her high school softball team to a triumphant state championship. Her passion for running led her to victory in her age category at various marathons. After earning a graduate degree in political science from Oklahoma University, she pursued a legal education, embarking on a remarkable career. Her professional journey began at the Clark County District Attorney's Office, followed by a tenure at a prestigious Las Vegas law firm, where she occasionally served as a judge in the North Las Vegas Justice Court. As her career flourished, Susan felt the call to motherhood. In August 1995, she wed Brent Dennis, a psychologist, and 4 years later, they welcomed their first daughter in October 1999, followed by a second daughter in April 2002. Susan's life was a tapestry of passions. She was an enthusiastic reader, a dedicated marathon runner, a lover of animals, and a nurturing mother and wife. Despite her demanding career as an attorney, she devoted her leisure time to her family. However, the tranquility of her life was shattered on January 3, 2015. At 6:48 a.m., Brent Dennis dialed 911 after discovering his 48-year-old wife unresponsive in their bed. Paramedics arrived swiftly, but despite their efforts, Susan was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. after Brent made the heart-wrenching decision to withdraw life support. He alleged that Susan had taken her own life, citing the discovery of 2 antifreeze bottles in the garage and suggesting she had ingested the toxic substance. When questioned about the circumstances surrounding her death, Brent revealed that the couple had been embroiled in ongoing disputes. He claimed that Susan had struggled with alcohol while on antidepressants and had previously threatened suicide. He further stated that he had slept soundly through the night, only to awaken to the tragic scene. The coroner's report revealed that Susan's demise was attributed to a lethal combination of ethylene glycol poisoning and oxycodone intoxication. Ethylene glycol, a primary component of antifreeze, initially led authorities to classify her death as a suicide. Yet numerous unsettling indicators emerged, casting shadows over this conclusion. The absence of any evidence in her bedroom suggested that Susan had not taken her own life. Detectives uncovered no suicide note, no glass bearing traces of antifreeze, nor any prescription bottles or antifreeze containers, rendering the suicide theory implausible. Despite the official ruling of suicide and the case being closed, Susan's family remained unconvinced. In 2016, her parents enlisted the expertise of retired FBI detective and attorney Tony Sergo to initiate a civil lawsuit against Brent Dennis on their behalf. The lawsuit contended that Susan's death was shrouded in suspicion, implicating Dennis, who had a clear financial incentive. He stood to gain from a $1 million life insurance policy taken out on Susan, in addition to being the beneficiary of her $1 million inheritance. Remarkably, within just 2 days of her passing, he was already negotiating with the insurance company. Beyond the financial implications, Dennis harbored a more sinister secret. Sergo's investigation unveiled troubling evidence against Dennis, including a substance abuse issue and a connection to Jeffrey Crosby, a man with a history of cocaine trafficking. During a civil deposition, Dennis confessed to purchasing drugs from Crosby, stating, "I would pay him cash and he would provide me." Upon discovering his drug use, Susan was incensed, leading to a crisis that compelled Dennis to seek treatment for his addiction. Phone records indicated 6 calls and texts from Susan to Crosby in the days preceding her death, suggesting she had reached out to warn him of her intent to alert the authorities. Susan yearned for her husband to break free from the clutches of addiction, yet his dependency endured. In a moment of desperation, she had previously threatened to alert the authorities about his drug use. The family's legal representatives uncovered cell phone records that revealed her numerous attempts to contact Crosby in the days leading up to her tragic demise, imploring him to cease supplying drugs to Dennis. Friends noted that she had confided in them about the unraveling of her marriage. Her parents assert that the day before her passing, Susan was distressed but showed no signs of suicidal intent. In fact, she had excitedly purchased airline tickets to San Jose, Atlanta, and Hawaii to support her daughter Anna at cheerleading competitions. Her parents vividly remember her enthusiasm regarding Anna's college aspirations. Dennis claimed that Susan had conducted multiple searches for antifreeze poisoning prior to her death, interpreting this as a sign of her suicidal intentions. However, investigators later discovered that the final search for antifreeze poisoning occurred at 5:15 a.m. on the day she was found unresponsive, a time when she was likely already unconscious. Records also indicated that Dennis had made 4 trips to New Orleans to meet with Crosby between January 9, 2015 and March 27, 2015. In response to ongoing pressure from the Winters family and emerging evidence, detectives opted to reopen the case in February 2017. During a traffic stop near his residence, Dennis was arrested on suspicion of open murder with a deadly weapon, allegedly having received prescription painkillers from his patients. At the time of his arrest, he was discovered with 3 painkiller pills in his right pocket. He was subsequently charged with voluntary manslaughter. In April 2017, the classification of Susan's death was altered from suicide to undetermined. Dennis was released on $250,000 bail, but later entered an Alford plea, which allowed him to maintain his innocence while acknowledging sufficient evidence for a conviction. 4 years after Susan's untimely death, Dennis was sentenced to a prison term of 3 to 10 years for voluntary manslaughter in connection with her passing. The Winters family experienced a measure of solace in the verdict, yet Susan's daughters, aged 22 and 20, remained steadfastly loyal to their father. In a poignant statement presented to the court, they expressed that Dennis had opted for the Alford plea solely to evade a more severe sentence, firmly asserting his innocence regarding their mother's tragic demise. Meanwhile, Susan's parents continue to grieve the loss of their beloved daughter and the rift with their granddaughters, yet they nurture a glimmer of hope that in time, the families may discover a path toward reconciliation and healing. When the mystery surrounding Diane Don's murder was finally unraveled 34 years later, her son, Mark Baer, now 36, was astounded by the resolution of such a long-standing case. The only remnants of evidence from that tragic day were fingernail scrapings and a single hair found in Diane's grasp. Diane Lynn Don, a vibrant 29-year-old mother, was a trailblazer as the first female radio repair technician at the San Diego Transit Company. Friends fondly remembered her as a free spirit, brimming with a delightful sense of humor. An artist at heart, she possessed a remarkable talent for the violin and harbored a passion for stock car racing, frequently seen at the El Kyle Speedway, reveling in the thrill of the races. On May 2, 1988, when Diane failed to arrive at work, her colleagues were immediately concerned, recognizing this as an unusual occurrence. One coworker decided to visit her Santee apartment, only to be met with a scene of unimaginable horror. Diane's lifeless body lay in her bed, brutally stabbed and bludgeoned. Meanwhile, her 2-year-old son, Mark, was found wandering the apartment complex, unattended. The police were summoned and an investigation commenced, but leads quickly evaporated. A thorough examination of Diane's life revealed no adversaries, no bitter ex-partners, no jealous lovers, and no apparent motives for insurance claims. The crime did not appear to be one of sexual assault or robbery. The perpetrator remained an elusive specter. Despite interrogating the maintenance man, the investigation yielded no fresh leads, and the case grew increasingly cold. Mark was adopted by close friends of Diane, yet he frequently visited her family to honor her memory. In a poignant interview, Mark Baer expressed the profound sense of loneliness that accompanied the loss of his mother, stating, "Even though I had my family, there's an emptiness knowing you've lost your mother. Reflecting on the challenges I faced, it often feels isolating because of what I endured." In the years 2000 and 2001, as advancements in technology emerged, investigators made another attempt to analyze the DNA collected from the crime scene. However, when they submitted it to a federal DNA database for unsolved cases, the results were disappointing. The sample lacked the strength needed for a breakthrough. In 2010, A dedicated cold case team revisited the investigation, meticulously examining the evidence for any overlooked details. They discovered that the hair found in Diane's hands corresponded with DNA samples collected from beneath her nails, confirming that she had valiantly fought back against her assailant. Although the sample was submitted to the combined DNA index system, it yielded no matches, suggesting that Diane's murderer either had no prior serious offenses or was exceptionally adept at evading capture. Fast forward to 2020, the cold case team collaborated with a crime lab, harnessing the power of cutting-edge genetic genealogy technology. This innovative approach allowed them to trace genetic profiles of potential relatives linked to DNA from unsolved crime scenes, enabling the identification of suspects who might otherwise have escaped justice. The Sheriff's Department issued a statement emphasizing that genetic genealogy was employed as a last resort in homicide investigations, as all other avenues had been thoroughly explored. Without this advanced technology, the case might have remained unresolved. By analyzing a single strand of hair and DNA samples, investigators successfully matched the genetic material to potential relatives within the genealogy database. This labor-intensive endeavor bore fruit, as investigators and genealogists meticulously sifted through over 1,300 DNA samples, constructing 9 family trees before a significant name emerged: Warren Robertson. Previously not considered as a suspect, Robertson was a local tow truck driver residing in the same apartment complex as Diane. He shared a passion for stock car racing and frequented the El Cajon Speedway, yet investigators found no evidence linking the two or confirming any prior acquaintance. Originally hailing from Arkansas, Robertson spent the majority of his life in San Diego. Following the murder, he relocated to Lakeside, leaving his family behind, and eventually moved to Indiana in 1989. Robertson appeared to have lived a life devoid of criminality, with his most egregious act being the tragic murder of Diane. Regrettably for Diane's family, the scales of justice remained unbalanced. Robertson had passed away 2 decades before the revelation of Diane's killer. He met his end in a house fire in Indiana in November 1999, at the age of 39. For Diane's family, uncovering the identity of the perpetrator brought a measure of solace. Bayer expressed contentment with the resolution, despite the fact that the murderer would evade justice. "The answers my family received provide closure, and closure is paramount, even after all these years," he remarked. He further shared that he had heard numerous commendations about his mother from those who knew her. "She was a remarkable person. Everything I've learned about her reinforces that she was truly good, and I strive to embody those values. The world is always in need of more goodness," he reflected. Diane's younger sister, Victoria, expressed her gratitude towards the investigators who unraveled the case. "I never believed anything would come of this. I feared I would leave this world without knowing, just as my parents would," she shared. "When they informed us of the breakthrough, it was, aside from the birth of my children, the most joyous day of my life. She can finally rest in peace. While we have an answer, it doesn't alleviate the pain," Victoria added. The sheriff's office noted, "This murder would likely have remained unsolved without the application of investigative genetic genealogy." At the tender age of 18, Barbara Jean Jepson embarked on a new chapter of her life alongside her husband, Joe Jepson, in a charming residence nestled in Van Nuys, California. With Joe serving in the National Guard and earning a respectable income, the couple eagerly anticipated expanding their family shortly after their nuptials. They exchanged vows in 1955, and by the end of that year, Barbara was expecting her first child. By January 1956, she was already 4 months into her pregnancy. On the seemingly ordinary day of January 31st, 1956, Joe departed for work early in the morning, leaving Barbara feeling a bit restless at home. Seeking diversion, she ventured out for some shopping. Later that afternoon, around 12:30 p.m., she was spotted by locals before returning home. However, when Joe returned from work, he was met with a horrific sight in their bedroom. There, he found Barbara's lifeless body on the mattress, a 10-inch butcher's knife gruesomely embedded in her chest. In shock, Joe covered her with a blanket and promptly contacted the authorities. Upon their arrival, detectives uncovered a trove of evidence at the scene. A military green jacket, stained with blood, lay just a few feet from Barbara's body, while hair follicles belonging to an unidentified individual were discovered in the garage. Unfortunately, crucial pieces of evidence, including bed linens, pillowcases, and a bloodied rug found in the sink, were not collected due to the absence of DNA technology at the time. The autopsy revealed that Barbara had been murdered between 1 and 4 p.m., and it was determined that she had suffered sexual assault prior to her brutal stabbing. The crime scene exhibited no signs of forced entry, theft, or struggle, leading investigators to suspect that Barbara may have been acquainted with her assailant. During interviews with neighbors, 2 witnesses emerged. One reported seeing an unfamiliar individual in the vicinity that day, clad in a green jacket, while another described a man with notably large hands and knuckles. Barbara's tragic fate marked her as yet another victim in a disturbing pattern of sexual assaults plaguing the nearby community. Police interrogated every individual with a history of similar offenses in the vicinity, yet they could not establish a connection to the tragic murder of Barbara. Initially, suspicion fell upon her husband, Joe, but he was exonerated when it was confirmed that he was at work at the time of the crime. With no viable suspects, the detectives found themselves at an impasse. Despite years of meticulous examination of the evidence, the quest for Barbara's murderer remained unresolved, leaving her case in a state of neglect. In 2016, DNA analysis was conducted on various items retrieved from the crime scene. However, the samples were insufficient to be entered into the combined DNA index system for potential matches. Furthermore, it was likely that the perpetrator's DNA had never been recorded in the system. By 2019, Detective Rachel Evans of the Los Angeles Police Department joined the cold case unit, and her inaugural assignment was the case of Barbara Jepson. She embarked on a thorough reevaluation of the leads, determined to uncover clues that had eluded investigators for 6 decades. It took her an entire week to peruse the case file for the first time, yet she found herself revisiting it repeatedly. By her 3rd review, she discerned several overlooked details that previous detectives had dismissed. Notably, the absence of forced entry indicated that Barbara likely knew her assailant. The fact that no items were stolen suggested that robbery was not the motive. With the premise that Barbara was acquainted with her attacker, Evans began to assemble the puzzle, honing in on one individual, Monte Mers. Born in 1911 in Utah, Mers had a tumultuous romantic history, having married his first wife in 1931, with whom he had a son and a daughter before their union disintegrated. Following that, he entered into another marriage, which also ended in failure. In 1945, during the divorce proceedings, his second wife cited cruelty as a reason for their separation, a testament to Mers's violent nature. He was a man of many vices, an inveterate gambler, a notorious womanizer, a cruel tormentor of animals, and a volatile alcoholic, truly a portrait of moral decay. Yet, inexplicably, women continued to be drawn to him. In 1948, he took up residence with a woman in the San Fernando Valley, establishing a common-law marriage that would last 6 years. This woman had a 10-year-old daughter from a previous relationship, and it is believed that he preyed upon her, engaging in his depraved habits. He had a pattern of marrying young women with daughters, only to exploit them. In 1955, as Barbara prepared for her own wedding, Mers entered into matrimony for the 4th time, this time to a woman who had 2 children, including a young girl. In 1960, a tragic incident occurred when a 15-year-old girl, who often rode horses with Mers, was brutally stabbed to death, yet no one was ever implicated in the crime. 2 years later, Mers wed for the 5th time, again to a woman with a young daughter. In 1964, he faced arrest for the molestation of a 14-year-old girl. Despite being suspected of numerous sexual offenses, this was the sole charge that led to his arrest. That same year, he appeared at a hospital with a gunshot wound, claiming it was an accident, though many suspected foul play. Investigators were unable to determine the shooter or the motive, but those close to him speculated it stemmed from his history of abuse and potential links to the murders of Barbara Jean Jepson and the 15-year-old girl. In 1965, following his arrest for child abuse, Merz underwent a polygraph examination concerning both murders. He denied any acquaintance with Barbara, yet it was later revealed that he had attended her funeral and maintained contact with her mother even after her tragic passing. Evans revealed that the results of the polygraph test indicated Merz possessed undeniable guilty knowledge concerning the tragic fate of the two murdered women. However, this evidence alone was insufficient for prosecution, as polygraph results are not recognized in court. As suspicions grew and the community began to sense something amiss, even Merz's own wife became wary. On August 15, 1965, she discovered the underwear of a young girl hidden in a drawer within their home. Confronting Merz about the disturbing find while he was out on bail, she questioned whether he had harmed the girl. This confrontation proved to be the tipping point. In a fit of rage, Merz seized a firearm and pursued Ina into the street, firing multiple shots that ultimately claimed her life. He then returned home and took his own life, marking a tragic end to his wretched existence. In a startling revelation in 2017, a former stepdaughter of Merz came forward with a harrowing account. On the day 15-year-old Pedrada was murdered, the then 10-year-old girl witnessed Merz entering the house, bloodied and wielding a knife. Paralyzed by fear, she held on to this traumatic memory for half a century before speaking out. It was reported that Merz subjected her to both physical and psychological torment, including a horrific incident where he stabbed her horse with a pitchfork. Now in her 60s, she confesses that the shadows of Merz's actions continue to haunt her. Further investigation by Evans uncovered a disturbing pattern. Merz never ceased his torment, even after remarrying or when his stepdaughters reached adulthood and left home. His abusive behavior persisted until his death. After extensive research, Evans managed to locate Merz's surviving relatives in Utah. In September 2019, a search warrant for DNA was executed on Merz's 87-year-old son, prior to the warrant's issuance. Detectives contemplated the exhumation of Merz's remains, yet they remained optimistic that the resolution of the case could be achieved through the collection of his son's DNA. Tragically, the son passed away merely 2 weeks after providing his genetic material to the investigators. While the DNA sample was insufficient for formal presentation, it yielded a significant match, establishing with 99% certainty that Merz was indeed the perpetrator of Barbara's murder. Furthermore, he was implicated in a series of other homicides and assaults, and had he been alive, he would have faced charges of first-degree murder. Regrettably, many individuals directly impacted by this heartbreaking crime have since departed from this world.